afternoon or good evening, depending on where in the world you're joining us from, and welcome back to the day 4 of the O2LAC Virtual Week 2020. My name is Itzel Barron, and we're thrilled to have you. For the past 9 years, O2LAC, as you know, has offered a space for technology service providers from companies from across Latin America and the Caribbean to network, to explore business opportunities through our matchmaking system, and to learn about the latest trends in technology directly from the companies who are pushing the envelope in their respective areas, as well as from the industry experts that closely follow them. Today's session will be conducted in both English and Spanish, so we invite you to locate the simultaneous interpretation button on the bottom of the window. Las intervenciones de nuestros panelistas serán en inglés y en español. Así que
Our panelists will be speaking English and Spanish, so please use the simultaneous interpretation button that you will find at the bottom of your screen.
For today's presenters on the chat, the team will be reviewing them, and we will share a couple of them with the session before it ends. As you know, today's session is titled Digital Service Models and Automation to Insulate the Economy from Future Crises. It's an honor to introduce our panelists today. Rohan Ranadiv, Senior Vice President, Head of Intelligent Automation at Truist. Ricardo Wolf, Global Business Services Mexico Hub Lead at PepsiCo. John Bree, Chief Evangelist and Chief Risk Officer at Supply Wisdom. And moderating this session, we have Atul Vashista, Chairman of NEO Group. NEO Group, as you may have noticed already, is a partner of this event. We invite you to check out their stand in the partner section of our website. And from all of us, thank you, Atul, for always supporting this forum over the years and for putting together such a stellar lineup for today's session. Welcome all. Atul, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Itzel. I'm delighted to have this session because all of us are together experiencing an event that has just been absolutely far-reaching. And at the same time, you can see which individuals and which companies have actually responded very well. And one of the things there's many things that stand out. One of the things that stands out that we're going to talk about today is the companies that were already significantly digital or digital forward have actually responded extremely well, both in terms of the stability and also in terms of how they have been resilient in providing services. Think about, companies that were already cloud first, companies that have significant digital engagement platforms with their employees, collaboration platforms for their employees, and digital engagement with customers. Think about the delivery services that are app-based. Think about the contactless payment services, and of course, trading companies. In fact, the latest results that we saw from Q2 were some of the big banks reporting earnings, and the ones that had significant trading increase volumes have done extremely well in spite of all these headwinds. And I'm most delighted because we have 3 panelists today, and of course we have this incredible audience from all over the Americas listening in. I urge you to ask questions and also share information. I'm delighted that Ricardo Wolf brings all the expertise from GBS with PepsiCo. He is the head of the Mexico hub for PepsiCo. Rohan Ranadiv comes from decades of experience in sourcing, and for the last few years has been very much focused at this very large bank, which was a merger between SunTrust and BB&T, focused on intelligent automation. And then John Bree, of course, prior Citibank, Deutsche Bank, global executive focused on vendor management and risk management, and now focused on continuous risk monitoring. So let me begin. Rohan, maybe you can set the stage for us. Digital models, automation, we've seen tremendous fast-paced improvements over the last 2 to 3 years. Maybe you'll start us off by talking about kind of digital models, 3 or so years ago to today, and why that has enabled many of these companies to respond so well to COVID.
Well, thank you, Atul. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here, and appreciate everyone all over the world that is listening. So 3 years ago, if you think about really, or even as close as pre-COVID, digital transformation in general was viewed more as a front office, web-based transformation, mobile apps, and everything that could be done. Very little effort was given to really transforming what I call it as the operations underbelly. And what that meant was you had great websites, you had great mobile apps that enhanced the client experience, but after that, a lot of the middle and back office processes were still not digital. That's really, to those organizations, I think COVID hit really, really hard because they suddenly lost track of their back and middle office people, couldn't get to work, and essentially the supply chain fulfillment processes completely stalled. You've seen digital models really pick up. I mean, many of these, especially banking and financial services organizations, had either what I call as full digital experiences at the front end, but the middle office and back offices were severely manual, for lack of a better word. And if you think about COVID, what happened as a result of COVID is people just started realizing that fulfillment has come to a complete stop. Very few companies really had that end-to-end Amazon experience. I always think about it like an iceberg. So if you think about the part of the iceberg that's really above the water, that's not only what digital transformation is. To really have that entire experience, you need to go all the way through. And give you a simple example here, right? I mean, for banks, when people really started got into financial hardship, government launched a lot of programs to help, from educating the customers through either customer-facing chatbots driven by natural language processing, to giving them their options, to then getting them to understand their options, sign electronically, and then fulfill that at the back end required an end-to-end automation process. You simply couldn't wait for the clients to call the call centers and wait on that experience because clients wanted an answer right now.
Yeah.
Overnight, your operations overseas, whether it was LATAM, Philippines, India, were all disrupted, and you needed a fully digital way to engage with the clients, inform them about their options, make them feel secure in the age of the pandemic, and make sure that they were fulfilled. So that really required a lot of quick transformation, and that is the main difference between what I see as 3 years ago and now, and that's really rampant in terms of how do we keep that experience moving across the industry, and especially at least in our company.
Yeah. So John, Ricardo, as we go through this session, please feel free to add anything. So I don't know if any reaction to what Rohan just said, either from you, John, or Ricardo.
Well, I saw that both Citibank and Deutsche Bank, and I think Rohan, you were right on the money. We did a lot up front, but then we were processing manually in the back end. So we were so people intensive on the back end, trying to keep up with what was happening with the customers. And that was everything from basic banking on the retail side through the more sophisticated corporate banking and transaction banking that we were doing.
Yeah.
Y si yo puedo agregar a lo comentado por John y por Rohan.
If I may add a comment to what John and Rohan were saying, I think, as Rohan was saying, this was just the tip of the iceberg, this situation we were seeing. These models had beautiful PowerPoints, but these were not true deep transformation processes. And now this has forced us to truly transform the industry, the back end, as John was saying, not just the front end. And this is a forum focused more on banking. They have very robust apps, but there are people behind them collecting the data, and that doesn't make sense. But now this actually has to be done in a completely digital way. And this really makes us think, how can, now that this true digital transformation is accelerating because of the situation that we're going through, how can we move forward with our teams, with our people, so that we can truly be digital?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. In fact, so one of the things that we wanted to focus this panel is not just talk about different kinds of automation, but really what are some great examples and stories of how automation is actually being adopted? And what are some of the challenges that you face so you can improve that? You know, when you think about what Rohan, John, and Ricardo were talking about, one of the underlying needs for better automation, particularly middle office and back office, has been around data. And then if you think about the secondary function, a lot of this technology has been about aiding humans, right? Which is, how do you support the work, maybe robotic process automation? How do you support decision-making, maybe moving up a little bit more level of AI? And Ricardo, I want to ask you this next question, which is, so, you know, this digital tool adoption, digitization, digital technologies, automation, AI, the reality is they're becoming a fundamental part of organizations. Some are at early stages, some have wider adoption, but it's very clearly that this whole aspect of human impact, human chain, right? Because humans are part of this work. It's not being done independent of them. What are you seeing to enable both acceptance, but also enable faster acceptance, kind of adoption? What are you seeing there, Ricardo?
Muchas gracias, Atul, por la pregunta.
Thank you, Atul, for the question. As you just said, there are some stories. Let me tell you a story of 4 to 5 years ago in the Financial Services Office of PepsiCo in Latin America. About 5 years ago, our journey began in the implementation of RPAs. And when we began this journey, we saw it as it was about 5 years ago. It was simply the implementation of some software. And when we started doing that, we realized that we were actually transforming not just the way the process was operating. We started with payable accounts at that time. And it wasn't just setting up the bots so we could make the work more efficient. We actually needed to transform the way in which not just a person who was going to be impacted by the way their work was going to change. We needed to look forward into the future, how this person's role was going to change, how the performance was going to change, and then also the supervisors. They were going to start supervising bots, the digital workforce in this case, and you know this well. So this was truly a pivotal moment, because we had to try to see how we could implement these technological changes, not just the RPAs, but within our change management strategy that we started to develop jointly. We also had to start thinking about the cultural aspect. And we were sort of spreading the gospel, I'd like to say, in terms of what automation means for the team and how is it going to impact you if you're part of the team. And for effective transformation management, what we needed to do was get these people on board. And when that happened, they themselves started proposing opportunities to automate some of the tasks, and they knew how their role was going to change. And we started making changes to some of the job descriptions based on the input we were getting from our staff. So in the end, we reached an outcome that provided the results we expected, but it did something deeper than that. It provided the chance for that quantum leap in terms of changing our culture. And the team became more aware that it was just living with this technology on a daily basis. It was simply living in harmony with this technology. It wasn't just a temporary thing. This was here to stay. So then we had some training programs, and now we have a cultural development platform for automation, again, spreading the gospel or educating our staff. And then we've also started to deal with the matter of agility. We have the Scrum Master and the sprints, but what happens with the mindset? So we began to also design the first courses for the agility mindset, and starting with our heads, with our minds. what does this mean for your day-to-day? And then we simply accelerated the program. So the combination of the automation program as a cultural matter, plus the agility program, and then it had a third pillar of continuous improvement with Sigma. So now we feel we have a robust program that allowed us from day one of the pandemic to have the right impact, because this was already part of our people's culture. Overnight, all the associates of our hub in Mexico, these are about 1,000 people, started working from home. No problem. The only check we had to do was to make sure the VPN was working well, because from before we'd had the plan that if there was any business disruption, everyone would have to work from home. So they all had laptops. So we simply had to run a test to make sure it was working. But that culture of continuing with the service, continuing to work only digitally, happened in a very seamless and simple way.
Yeah, Ricardo, thank you for that. I want to reinforce some of the points that you made, because the earlier years of RPA, and even now sometimes I find with robotic process automation, people get sometimes too focused on simply automating the piece of work and not recognizing that fundamentally what that automation is doing is you are automating a certain part of a person's job, and if you don't redefine, recalibrate, re-educate, that person is not actually being successful. The second is that when you do that automation, often it's not simply about automating that piece of work. I think you can imagine that work very differently. And Rohan, I'd love for you to jump in and kind of think about, over the last 2 or 3 years, some of the automation, taking on what Ricardo said, both from a change in people's perspective, but how you have thought about not just automating a piece of work, but thinking about work differently.
Joel, thank you for letting me chime in. As Ricardo said, the change management aspect and giving people or letting them know what their reason to be is one of the most critical things, and that's also the point that is often overlooked and causes post heartburn, right? So if you are able to put something in practice, but you don't really give people something else to do, then the only thing they know is to do it the old way. They're going to fight the process, because one of the things about automation is the automated process will work differently than how the person actually did the job. And I give a simple example is, if you're building an automation, if you don't train the bot you try to open a web page, for example, and the web page doesn't come up the first time, a human intuitively will do it 2 or 3 times before, raising the red flag and saying, I don't think there's a problem with my connectivity. A bot on the other end, if you don't train it to check 3 or 4 times, the first time is going to crap out, and then it's like done, right? It's gone into the exception queue. So those are some of the important things that you have to build in the design of that process. And the education has to be imparted and training provided for folks to understand that this is different. This is not a true robot, but a software robot that actually does the change management. You need to, as Ricardo said, you need to teach the people that their job goes from supervising humans and looking at their output and attendance to measures of productivity and metrics. How do you repurpose the people to do something bigger and better for the organization? And an example that I would give you is, we always call it making the art of the possible real. We were tasked with a challenge where, we didn't have as many what we call as sales and service assistants that could help the bankers make meaningful pitches to our commercial small business clients. And in some ways, execution was suffering. So what we really did was, again, automation allowed us to create a virtual assistant for every banker. So the banker simply said, well, I'm going to go have this great, meeting with so-and-so company. The automation built all of the materials that the banker could possibly have: industry sources, internet sources, data from our Salesforce and other applications, transaction history about banking, and it put it in a neat presentation. Well, what that did is overnight amplify the value that our bankers could now provide the clients. So things of that nature are critical. The sales assistants that were there were impressed, and they embraced the process. So that's really key in terms of change management and adoption.
Right.
And the bankers themselves had all the information at their fingertips. So if you don't think about the whole process and how it impacts the front office or the stakeholders, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Right. Those are good points. John, as you're hearing this conversation, and I know on a weekly basis, you're talking to some of the largest banks, some of the largest insurance companies. One of the things that people often talk about, John, is, I know you are also very integral, in the 911 response. So, there was many areas where you talk about responding immediately to certain challenges. There's been this great discussion of, and in fact, there's a question from the audience, how, work is going to fundamentally change. What COVID did is it fundamentally proved the model that a highly digitized model, right, greater automation actually works even in a work from home environment. John, just based on what you've heard, change to human behavior and impact from a change management perspective, what's your thinking when you look into the future and you say, based on what I've seen, what I've learned, I think this is how the future of work changes. What do you think, John?
Well, I think you're right. One of the challenges we're going to have is that even though when we open up locations, people are not going to want to go back to them. People are not going to want on subways and trains and buses. They're just not going to want to do that. We saw that after 9/11. No one would work above the 4th floor. But I think what's, being the chief evangelist and the chief risk officer is really a split personality, because I promote all of this and then I have to take a step back and say, but remember, we have to control the new environment. So where when we have traders in locked in environments where we controlled where they were, what they did, they're now working in a remote environment. We don't know who's sitting at the table with them. We don't know who's looking over their shoulder. Doesn't mean we can't do it. We just have to take all the automation that Ricardo and Rohan were talking about to make the transactions and the activity better and use that same logic in building our control environment. I think that's going to be the big change as we move forward, because this has to happen. There is no plan B.
John, I always appreciate you because, I am very much an art of the possible. And it's always important to remember what risks need to be managed as you think about the art of the possible, for sure. I want to take a step back and kind of talk about this change, this rethinking. All of you have been exposed to a number of digital tools, automation tools. Let's rethink the basics, right? We've learned a lot because of this response to COVID in terms of how digital tools and automation tools have been beneficial. Let's start with kind of like hiring, onboarding, providing training, and maybe Ricardo will start with you. Is talk about what have you fundamentally either changed or based on what you have learned, what you think is possible or are going to change by leveraging digital and automation tools regarding hiring, training, onboarding kind of areas.
Por supuesto, Atul. Creo que
Yes, of course, Atul. I think this is one of the aspects that are most impacting our situation. And why do I say that? Well, because we're human beings. And ultimately, as human beings, we seek contact. We seek acceptance. We want somebody to look at us and say, welcome to this office.
De nuestro hub.
So I think from the point of view of our hub, when we started doing this all virtually, the way that we tried to, let's call it, break the ice with newcomers just coming into the organization was, I'm sure it's a practice that's been done somewhere else as well. But what we did was assign to them a buddy, like they do in colleges in the US. This is a person who's going to be available to you 24/7. So that person can convey to you what are the customs, show you the ropes of how things are done with clients, with supervisors, with clients in Europe or in Latin America. It was really simple. instead of creating a document that they had to go to human resources and sign, we simply started using technological tools, and we had their confirmed electronic signal, and this was approved by our lawyers, and then we could simply start that formal relationship with them. And for the onboarding, there was a lot of material that was already digital, and a lot of classes that we already had the videos stored on the cloud. So they would just take those classes in the beginning and getting to know the company and what they would be doing. But that leap from just superficially how they're coming in to actually already acting in their new role, that's two completely different things. So in this way, we've been able to achieve better adoption, let's say, better receiving of these new people coming in. They feel welcome, but we've also included new other digital tools that we can use for our profiles of the people we are hiring, retina readers, psychometric testing, and we're using AI for that, so we can be more accurate in finding the right match for the role that we need to fulfill. And this has helped us keep our employees longer and make sure that the people who come into the company are suited to their role that we're looking for a much longer time in our company. And also there has been an intensification of this connection that is established with the team they are going to form a part of. Surely all of us on this panel and the people who are listening to us have had virtual relaxation sessions at this point. In those virtual sessions, what we've also done is to mention these new people so that they feel welcome, they're part of this culture. Perhaps these are a bit overused, a bit cliche, but there are things that we can do. Perhaps in the office, it used to be that there was an icebreaker with all these people asking the newcomer, what's your name, what's your spouse's name, show us these pictures. But this is something that can be done digitally, and perhaps it's less uncomfortable. Otherwise, it might take years for someone to share part of their life in this way. So this is one of the benefits that we've reaped from a situation such as this one. We're forced to get to know people much faster so they can rapidly begin to form part of our group.
And Ricardo, do you feel that you've been able to do this across all your global business services hubs, or is it kind of still everybody's kind of trying to figure it out themselves?
Excelente pregunta, Tul. Y fíjate que aquí es cuando tenemos una gran colaboración.
Great question. And this is where we have great global collaboration. The first efforts we did with our Cracovia hub. They started doing it. We adopted some of their practices, and then the Hyderabad hub started to do it too. But there are some hiring limitations in India, as you know. But it's this situation where for the first time the entire planet is going through the same thing, and this global unity in going through this gave us what we needed, being able to share our experiences, and other hubs as well contributed to this, and all of this now is a model that is applied all over the world in all our hubs.
Right. Rohan, you wanted to jump in?
Happy to. I think Ricardo covered it really well. I think the issues that primarily, depending upon the industry, right, banking, financial services, insurance, etc., you will see privacy issues which run rampant, and working from home causes certain problems. May not necessarily be in the United States, but as you start looking at global delivery centers all over the world that are processing loans and payments and checks, that really becomes a big problem, even for technology delivery and support. There are lots of regulatory guidance and acts that financial companies are responsible for. There's a lot of fraud going on. There's a lot of cybersecurity threats. So as trying to balance. I don't really envy the positions of most chief risk officers, as they have to balance, as you said, the art of the possible and what can be done with the risks and the controls, a control environment. But I'm yet to see what either the big outsourcing companies or others that provide services, what steps they're taking. Different countries really don't have a ability to do a work from home environment. Internet connectivity is not as pervasive. You may have spotty connectivity. You may have a lot of people in the vicinity. It may not be quiet. So for example, call center employees may have to go to a place where it's quiet, there is white noise, otherwise they may not be able to perform their work. So these are real problems when it comes to different, especially as you start leaving the continental United States. That's really where these problems start taking a bigger, become real issues. And really, how do you manage that? Now, if you switch that back to just the core United States and other offices for people wanting to go in, it creates a different problem, right? What happens to all the real estate? Majority of the folks, at least in the United States, my entire team and several other teammates can essentially work from home. I mean, we've not skipped a beat.
Yeah.
So it starts creating different problems, right? We've got a brand new building in uptown Charlotte. There are different banks and facilities all over. What happens to real estate if people don't have to go in? It's a different problem, and I don't know if people are thinking about it long term, the social implications, the financial implications, and so on. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah, I hear these coins jingling in the background. I think that was a money statement, Rohan. John, I know you've been dealing with this, right? I know you get this question often from chief risk officers. You came from the anti-money laundering world, fraud world, so you've been through that. What's your take on what Rohan was talking about?
Well, he hit it right on the head. What's going to happen is that because things are happening faster, because things are happening at a much more rapid pace, you could no longer wait for something to happen and then kind of resolve it. Predictive analytics is where we need to be. Now, we've been doing this in marketing for years. We did this years ago in fraud when we realized that online banking was terrific. And the only people that were better at online banking than us at Citibank were the thieves. They were so much faster than we were because they didn't have the regulators. So we had to learn to keep up with them, and that we did everything on predictive analytics. The only way you can do predictive analytics is have real-time intelligence. You need current, up-to-the-minute data. And those are some of the things we're seeing. We talk to a lot of clients about that, and we help them build models that can show patterns and say, if these three things happen, you might want to be ready for number 4. And those are the kind of things that we're going to see, and that's going to grow. That's going to be a tremendous part of the future industry of the whole world of online business.
Yeah, thank you, John. So we were just talking about talent, right? Hiring, onboarding, training. One of the questions from the audience is, so the home office acceleration to work happened very rapidly because of this pandemic. But there really aren't any standards for digital literacy or, here's a standard job skill or job conduct for work from home, or for that matter, digital automation roles that are coming up. And, and right now companies are so focused on kind of just respond to this pandemic that they really haven't focused on it. Do you, what's your thinking on how and when will corporation move towards kind of becoming much more standardized in the way they define what digital literacy is, what kind of skill sets are right for these jobs, or do you feel it's already there? Maybe Ricardo, you want to start that?
Sí, mi punto de vista aquí es.
Sure. My way of looking at it is that in some areas in particular, as John was saying, and rightly so, this already happened. This is already happening, and really what we're looking for in employees is that they be data scientists, so that they are able to execute data analytics that is much deeper. So There are other areas where what we have is a greenfield. This part is not a component as of yet. So I think that our current situation will lead us to look for certain basic standards, and let's say go back to basics, and I'll repeat it, that let's go back to the very basics. Be ready to use Teams and Zoom, whatever it takes, so that you can have a normal workday. And I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. I'm talking about the most basic elements. How many homemakers had to learn to use Zoom in order to get their kids online and e-learning, so many of them. So this is definitely a part of our new roles, the new job description, where you can't just have basic knowledge of tools. Your knowledge needs to be much more advanced, and you need to know how to use them. And just to add to what John said, when it comes to how to manage risk, a part of what needs to be a standard also is how to take care of your information. There needs to be certification and data classification. How do you manage data? How do you encrypt your communications? How do you use your work tools, whether we're talking about a laptop or an iPad or a cell phone? So I think that all of this is going to be a new upcoming standard to cover our environments, because right now what happens, our hub used to have 3 areas in Mexico City, and now we have 1,000. I'm counting all of the homes of the people who work for us. So how do we take care for all of these homes? And that's part of the new standard.
That's a good way to say it. You know, it's no longer one hub, it's 1,000 hubs for sure. Ron, have you on, you know, kind of riding on top of what Ricardo was talking, have you done any, or your teams have done any kind of redefinition of job descriptions, align skill sets to it, particularly focus around digital skills, digital literacy, around that?
Well, not yet. I think, you know, I think like most, right now we're trying to keep our head above water. I forgot to mention this, but, you know, there's never a good time for COVID, but we are also in the middle of one of the largest mergers. So our merger integration plans for combining, you know, 2 very large banks together are underway. And, you know, this time we had to do what we had to do to survive COVID, do what's right by our clients, create foundations and grants. And our human resources team is actively looking at what that new normal looks like, but it's not yet not yet decided. I think the first thing we had to do was to make sure that the teammates were able to, you know, continue the work, and then we made sure that our by extension our contract workforce all over the world, specifically in Asia, was able to, you know, get to the work. So, you know, that's really keeping head above water. And now, as we get to the final stages, and, you know, nobody knows when this will actually end. So just trying to, you know, come up with a good strategy. But now, to be quite candid, we're still struggling in that realm.
Yeah. No, I think there's definitely in many areas early stages, but there's a lot of learning from others. I was on a call with 11 heads of GBSs, Global Business Services. And one of the discussions we were having was around Automation Center of Excellence, right? Kind of, you know, how did you start? Where are you? And it was really interesting to hear the different stages people are, right? And so there's a tremendous amount of learning we can have from each other. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to pose a question to you that I don't want you to answer now, because it'll be my last question to you. And it's a question from the audience, but I do want you to reflect on it. So automation, very clearly, digitization, very clearly a big opportunity, right? At the same time, when you think about small and medium enterprises, often in many areas, it's an expensive opportunity. You know, often a last mile problem in supply chain, for example, can be solved through drones or other automation, but it's not always the cheapest solutions. So I would love for you at the very end of this call, when I ask you the final question, is what advice would you give either to a small, medium enterprise that wants to adopt automation? What would be a cheaper, more effective way of doing that? Or a flip side, which is if I'm an entrepreneur, what opportunity do you think you see out there regarding automation, digitization that I should be going after? So, right, I want you to think about that. That'll be my final question to you in the last about 6 minutes or so. So we were just talking about kind of like, how hiring is changing, how we can change it. Let's think about, one of the questions in that GBS meeting was, how do we rethink our business models? Right. And, maybe I'll start with you, John, think about all the digitization, John, that you are seeing. And again, rapidly increasing in importance because of the pandemic. Are there good examples, John, where you have said, gosh, this process absolutely needs to be rethought. The way we've been doing this all this time, so clearly we were bound by these rules that didn't really matter anymore. So talk to me your perspective on what should we be doing to rethink fundamentally our business models?
A great question we used to ask was, who cares? When we got into these things, we would talk about controls and everybody said we have to have all these controls, and we'd say, well, okay, but who really cares? Does it really matter? So what you have to start to think about is, what are really the critical issues? What are the mission statements? What are we trying to accomplish? Most importantly, and I'm going to say this, Tully, you've heard me say this in the past, getting the entire risk and control group at the front of the design lifecycle. Work together on what you're trying to accomplish, because governance, controls, and risk is about how, not about no. So the challenge that we're facing is, we need to get products out fast. We need to get new concepts, new process, new programs out fast. We can't spend 6 months doing a risk assessment. We have to do it quicker, and we have to do it as we're building the program. I think, I wasn't sure it was Rohan or Ricardo said something about, you have to keep looking ahead. You have to, it's almost a design build environment. You're designing it as you're building it. And I think we're going to see so much more of that. I hope that was kind of the answer you were looking for.
Yeah, John, I think my takeaway from that is what you're saying is, look into your organization. The people that are going to say no to you, engage them early.
Absolutely. Get the naysayers on the team.
Yeah. Rohan?
Hey, there's a saying that I go by, right, in organization, never take no from anyone that is not empowered to say yes, which unfortunately happens way too many times, right? So I agree with John, is you want to get everyone at the front end. There is one challenge though with that concept is, if you follow the law of large numbers and you've got way too many naysayers, you may not even get your idea off the ground. So I think the important thing is, how do we, continue to innovate in the space where you've got the right people at the table. You're continuously looking at different initiatives. And I'll give you an example, right? So if banks still had branches open. COVID changed the model, right? Our mobile deposits went through the roof. Guess what? What gift do you get with mobile deposits? Fraud, right? As John said, you get a lot of fraud, right? Were we ready? Our process included taking the deposit, running it through a rules-based algorithm at the back end. The client feels they made the deposit. We get a lot of what I call as false positives, which is transactions which are rules engine things are fraudulent, but they are not.
Yeah.
I mean, think about what the government did over the last, in the Paycheck Protection Program and others. They sent people checks. So people here are struggling. They're trying to deposit their checks. Well, the deposit should go through to their accounts very quickly. Well, the fraud catches it. We're never ready to deal with that volume of fraud. So if you think about digitization, now can we get at the front end, apply machine learning models to reduce the number of documents that could be tracked? Now, there's a real opportunity in ability to manage fraud through predictive analytics and other things. Why? To create that experience. Normally this would be fine. You see a 2-day check deposit window, but in this case, people needed money instantaneously, that they're saying, well, hey, the government just gave me a check. Why can't I cash this check pretty quickly to feed my family? Real problems exacerbated by not having the right, digital underbelly, as I called it, or the operations underbelly. So, and to do this, right, you need to get the risk people at the front end, or get the right risk people, right? Some risk people would still say, why are we doing this? There's too much of fraud. So a lot of banks don't have a mobile deposit capture experience. So I think John is right, but at the same time, you need to make sure that you got to get the right people to, to foster innovation.
Yeah, so this is about rethinking. Ricardo, do you want to add to that?
Prácticamente lo mismo que comenta.
About the same that Rohan just said. His comments, the right person at the right time. I think that in the right place, I think that is absolutely key. And of course, you need to put that person there, but you need to continue to work on this task, and the person needs to continue to learn, as well as John was saying, from the design. You need to start, and then you need to ramp up when people are in the right place, doing the right thing at the right time.
Yeah. So, these are really interesting conversations regarding kind of how do we rethink. One of the areas that it's also a question from the audience that I want to ask you all is, very clearly automation and digital tools has enabled this response for companies to be able to keep providing the services. It's also become pretty clear is that many things worked because of that. This is going to have a positive impact on GDP. This is going to have a positive impact on these companies. But what about the human impact? So, think about now all these people working from home, often now lacking that human touch, this interaction that happens in an office, colleague next door or colleague right next to you. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how can one maximize this digital experience and at the same time, make sure that the human experience, which is the workers themselves, is also being maximized and it's not being minimized. Any thinking, any thoughts on that? I'll open up to any one of you three who wants to go first.
Si quieres, comienzo con tres
If you'd
ideas.
like, I'll start with 3 ideas that spring to mind about that. The first is that I think that this is our new normal already, because COVID is not going anywhere. COVID is here to stay, and this is our new normal. At some point in time, we'll go back to work, but it will be different. So my first thought on that is what the value will be in bringing together your working team. Why are you bringing them together? If you can really work, if your front office, back office can work 100% virtually, then what would be the reason to bring them together? From our viewpoint, bringing them together would be to unleash the talent, just unleash it and build proactively what is to come. I think their interaction between humans is extremely valuable. My second comment is that before, what we could see in a person in the workplace was 100%. So what happened because of the pandemic, this 100% is not just 100%, it's split into family, it's split into recreation. We could talk about all the different slices of that pie. Now our viewpoint is that we are more vulnerable. Why are we more vulnerable? Because everyone is seeing what's going on behind us. People can see that we are actually people, we're not robots. Speaking to digitalization, working 24/7. So this new reality is giving us a way to work virtually in different spaces, to work in a space where we can say, hey, it's okay if you take a break, if it's okay if you have to work on e-schooling. So that is a reality, and it'll bring us together. Ironically, we'll be more human, we'll be made to look more human through technology. And my third point is that we are living, and we need to live in the here and now. Digital strategies need to be built, of course, and the farther away in the future, the better. However, this situation, we've been doing this for almost 5 months now, and this has made us think about the fact that we really do need to live in the here and now and build in the here and now for what's to come, not what's to come in 20 years, but what's to come tomorrow.
I appreciate that, Ricardo. Well said.
Hey, Atul, here's an interesting observation for the audience, right? 3 or 4 months, I think we've got enough data points. If you think about people's social style indicator or Myers-Briggs type indicator, having a opportunity to lead a diverse team, you see all of these things playing out, right? Some people who are on the east side, are really missing the whole office environment. They want to meet with their colleagues, right? They want to go out and have those lunch, and they want to have those water cooler conversations, and they're missing that, right? Those are the ones that are ever willing to turn their video camera on and have conversations. And then you've got the other side of the spectrum, the introversion, right? These are the people that would love to do their jobs. They eat at their desk. They're really, hey, tell me what I need to do and I'll just get it done. And not good or bad. That's just how they operate. So you see that suddenly the playing field, and in some cases, you could argue that the introversion people miss some of the conversations and were left out. Well, this is kind of level the playing field for them. I mean, their productivity has gone through the roof. They are able to talk to the people exactly the way they want to talk, which is either through IM, through email, or through phone. They never want anyone coming to their desk and to bother them. So it's created a different working environment. I've seen people's productivities go out through the roofs, and then I've still seen others just struggling because they're lacking for that human touch, for that contact. And so it's interesting. We've had to do, happy hours and social hours virtually, where, you bring up your own margarita and show up. And so interesting dynamics. But I mean, again, if you think about, we sometimes think only about one type of people, which mostly reflects us. But, it hadn't even started dawning on me until I saw this realm of people that some are just absolutely blissfully happy. They are like, I don't ever want to go back. Yeah. And some are like just dying, hey, when can we go have our first, meeting together? Or when can we have a team building session? Yeah. So just trying to balance the two out. That's the new normal now.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder, right? That people are different, and you can't use the same management approaches, the same reward approaches across the board. You've got to treat them individually, and this is highlighting even more so. John, you're itching to add something.
Well, I was born and raised in New York City, but I had the luxury of living in different parts of the world. And one of the things I learned is that you must immediately understand the culture of the local environment. And, we sit here and I'm in one room working and my daughter's upstairs, working, and, you're in your room with Tool and Ricardo somewhere, and we're all spread around. But think about some of the locations around the world where a lot of our support people are living with 3 generations in one household. There were 5 people sitting at the table trying to get this done, as opposed to, having their own little area to work in. So I think we have to be sensitive to that. I think, Rohan, you hit it right on the head, and Ricardo. We got to realize that there's going to be a tremendous impact outside of, the environments that we work in. And I'm very sensitive to that when we talk to some of our teammates and some of our analysts, raising kids and trying to do things. It's tough when you got a couple of 3-year-olds running around, and so yeah. I think it's important that we think about that.
Yeah. I think if there is one lesson that the audience takes away from your conversation, what I'm taking away from all the 3 of you, and I'm going to still ask you the final question. The lesson is that, when you think about digital models and automation, make sure you remember the human impact and the human that's involved, because that's going to be the critical component of a failure or success of a digital or automation model. So for each one of you, I remember I asked you the question, which is I'd like you to comment on, for our small, medium businesses, entrepreneurs out there, what's the opportunity they should be thinking about? And the second part is, if they're thinking about leveraging automation themselves, what could be a cost-effective way of being able to do that? I'll open it up to see whoever wants to go first, and then we'll go through the rest of you.
Well, I'll go first, because I have, listening to all this and the great ideas, my new business is going to be using automation to be able to locate people in areas, and we're doing this already in some areas, that are in similar situations I am. So where I can't travel to that office, but it'd be nice to know who in my immediate geographical area, maybe someone I could talk to. Maybe we can have an actual face-to-face margarita and stay 6 feet apart, but get maybe 4 or 5 people in an area, and we can actually have that interaction. It may not be my, workmate from Supply Wisdom, but it might be someone that works for, Chase or JP Morgan or something. So I think that's going to be my new endeavor, is to come up with an app to find like-minded people near me who I can sit down and have a drink with.
Thank you, John. Ricardo, you want to go?
Me gusta la idea, John.
I like that idea, John. I'm going to be one of the first users of your app so that we can sit down, have a margarita together, and talk about new business. My key takeaway, I think, when it comes to that question has to do with the agility mindset. We know that in Formula One, for example, the driver who wins is the one who's able to adapt to the course conditions the best and the fastest. So when it comes to entrepreneurs or SMEs, I would say, first, adaptability. And as John said, what opportunities are coming up? What are they? Because this intellectual curiosity, the desire to not look for them, but think about them because they're happening and they're happening right now. But obviously, it does depend on capital and investments, as O2LAC was saying. I think that the idea of the MVP, or the most valuable product, could be extremely useful. We don't want to build a car from the beginning. If we have a tire and the tire works and the tire can create revenue to finance building the rest of the solution, then that's a good place to start.
Thank you, Ricardo. Rohan?
I would be the second one, since Ricardo took the first part. But something that I've been looking at is, in this COVID times, you're getting so much of information. And how do you correlate that information with your local areas, right? I think people are so used to ordering things from Amazon, but if you think about local businesses, whether it's restaurants, grocery stores, small businesses, anything in the vicinity that you can connect with either like-minded people, like-minded businesses to facilitate commerce, right? What is going to get this economy started? The travel industry is in a bust, right? I mean, so how do you get this wheel turning again? And it's always been that these small and medium-sized enterprises are the engine that continue to grow. So how do you connect these? I'll just call it, I don't want to call it the cartels, but it's a bad word. But how do you come up with this, a group of companies that can solve problems and come together? That's going to be the killer app, right? My local news, what's happening in my locality, who can I talk to, where do I get my news and information, right? My health checks, all of that is going to be important. What's my financial status? That's really going to be the killer app that is going to unite the people together. And then you obviously start having these circles, and you connect the circles and you widen your network.
That's wonderful. So let me bring this panel to a conclusion with 3 thoughts. First is, I've fundamentally been a believer for 3 decades about talent without borders. I think our digital models have proven that it is even more possible today and tomorrow than it ever was. And that itself opens up tremendous opportunities for entrepreneurs, for individuals, for both large and small companies. Is imagine you can recruit and leverage talent anywhere, and you can do it digitally. You don't have to have offices. Secondly, I want to say thank you to Ricardo, John, Rohan, and the audience, and O2LAC for organizing this. Finally, I'd like to leave you with a thought. Connect Americas is an incredible platform that brings together all of us. It's a digital platform. The very question that we just answered, let's use Connect America, the digital platform, to post our need. So if you're an entrepreneur that has a solution, post your solution. If you're an entrepreneur or a small, medium enterprise, or for that matter, large enterprise like Ricardo and Rohan are part of, post those needs or those solutions so we can all collaborate, because we do have this digital platform that's available to all of us. With that, thank you very much. And I'm going to turn this back into Itzel. Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rohan.
Thank you all. This has been a fantastic panel, really engaging, wonderful responses from everyone. Thank you so much. Nothing else to add, but to thank you again on behalf of the Inter-American Development Bank. A reminder to our audience that you will be able to see this again. Don't worry. I know I was furiously taking notes as well, so don't worry. You'll be able to replay it. It will be available on our website and in Connect Americas once the event is over. And a quick reminder for tomorrow's sessions. This was today's last session. Tomorrow we have 5 sessions, about creative industries in Colombia, in the Caribbean. We have a session about video games, about animation. It's going to be super interesting. A great way to close your week, so make sure to check out the agenda online. Thank you again, guys, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.